Okay. Hello, everybody. Where's the screen? Okay. Hey, everybody, and welcome to our call today on NFTs, or a thing, how big, how fast. This is Lou Kerner with Crypto Oracle. And for those who aren't familiar with Crypto Oracle, we're a community-first company, and we help other companies build, grow, and engage their crypto communities. And one of the reasons that we're so excited about NFTs is that we really believe that when you incentivize communities, when you incentivize individuals in your community, so far there's been a lot of focus on cash and cash-like incentives, like a Bitcoin for providing hashing power for Bitcoin, but we would believe that the incentives in the future, the much more powerful ones, will be non-cash-like incentives. So, things that maybe confer status, or things that people have value, actually give value to, like potentially NFTs, that actually don't cost anything to produce. So we're really excited for today's call. I think we've got 4 great experts who are all going to be talking about NFTs from their own, unique angle. And we're going to start off the call. Each speaker is going to talk for about 10 minutes, and hopefully we'll have 10, 15 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. So you can put in your questions via the chat app on Zoom. And with that, we're going to turn the call over to Teman from Portis. Tom?
Thanks, Lou. So
take over the computer?
Yeah, I'll share my screen, and thank you for hosting this great call. And yeah, give me a second, and here we go. Everybody sees it?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And so as you mentioned, I'm from Portis. Portis is, we offer an SDK for developers to have a Web3 provider inside your dev bundled in, so you don't have to do anything else besides that. Your users don't have to work hard. They just get a solution bundled inside the dApp, no installation, but we'll come to that soon. So in general, collectibles is something which is very human. And the whole concept has a lot of potential when you're talking about blockchain, because the value of having something which is collectible is very strong. And we each are interested in collectibles for different reasons. It could be because of value. It could be because it has sentimental meaning for us, but it's a long-lasting human tradition, so to say, in terms of collecting stuff. Now, collectibles doesn't have to be just, we're all used to baseball cards or Magic the Gathering cards, and those are physical items. But this doesn't only apply to physical items, and we saw that online gaming offers a huge potential for virtual items which are collectible. But one of the things that is very necessary for a thing to be actually collectible is for it to be scarce. There are not many copies of it, and there won't be, and you can guarantee there won't be any other copies of it. And when you're talking about physical items, a lot of time the collectible companies, if we're talking about baseball cards or Pokemon or Magic the Gathering, the companies actually promise people, we're not gonna print anymore, we promise. Sometimes those promises held up, sometimes they didn't, and that affect the collectibleness of the item. And I think it was about a year ago, there was a company called back then Zen Axiom, which created the CryptoKitties, which are non-fungible token. And non-fungible tokens are very interesting in the world of blockchain, because what they did is, instead of having ERC20 tokens, which everybody knows and are the standard token, they're fungible. They're like US dollars. If you have 10 of those tokens, someone else has 10 of those tokens, you don't mind exchanging them. It's pretty much the same thing. But the ERC 721 contract, it defines a new kind of token, which is unique, like a baseball card. We might even have the same baseball card, but you still wouldn't say they're the same. Yours might have some history behind it. It might have a signature by someone, by the player itself. So it has that, uniqueness to it. And everybody knows that CryptoKitties took off in an amazing way, and they demonstrated that this can work. This has a huge potential. And so we, came to light the digital collectibles. And, NFTs, they're very important because they drive people into blockchain. It bridges the gap for the human aspect of the collectibleness, and it introduces it into the world of smart contracts. But these are not your grandpa's baseball cards. First of all, they could never be destroyed. You can't stop anyone from creating any collectible they want. You truly own this collectible, as opposed to the skin that I showed before in the game that costs $500, and that's even a cheap one. It doesn't provide any value to the person. It's just for being beautiful and whatever the person likes about that. But a month from now, the company might say, you know what, that skin, we don't like it, we're shutting it down. You can't shut it down. You truly own it. And there is the digital scarcity because of the way blockchain works in the ERC 721 contract is defined. But the interesting things we get out of blockchain, in addition to all of that, is also the fact that it's completely open and interoperable. There's an interoperability between all of those different assets. And that creates a very interesting situation, because the possibilities are almost limitless. You can take it to a different platform like OpenSea, for instance, and they'll probably discuss it once it's their turn, and you can sell it there if you want. It's not limited just to where you got that skin or that digital asset. And of course, all of that creates a global liquidity, which is very, very strong. And so we talked about the fact that being a collectibles is a very human need, a very human thing. But if we want to reach the average person who will use it, those humans that we're talking about, we have to keep the experience simple. If to get that digital baseball card, you now have to install a special browser and understand private keys and hex values and gas and a lot of difficult stuff, we're not going to get it in the hands of the average person. And this is what Portis is aiming to solve. We're trying to keep the experience of the users very, very simple. So first of all, what we offer is an SDK to the developers, which means users don't need to install anything. On the other hand, we make sure users have absolute control over their private keys, over their wallets. So we use end-to-end encryption. So when a user creates their wallet inside the browser, it's encrypted automatically on the device using the user's password, which nobody knows on earth besides them. They only send us the encrypted wallet for safekeeping, and now they can easily access it from their phone, from their desktop, on any modern browsers without installing anything. Sorry. And our goal is to make sure that they don't have to deal with the difficult part of blockchain. We tell them, just remember your password, that's all you need, and we try to take care of the rest. So it works on all of their devices that get that cloud experience because they can access it everywhere. We make sure they're the owners. We're non-custodials. We can't access anybody's private keys, which we feel is that's a key component in this whole thing. And we're adding features like Trust This app or Gas Relay, which make sure that using them, those applications become simple and smooth and easy. And Trust This app allows the user to say, look, I trust this application, so I don't need to confirm each and every action I'm doing. As long as I'm not paying for something, if I'm just signing something over, I already confirmed it inside the application. So when you do that action, you get sorry. One second, sorry about that. So when you do that action, you get a confirmation telling you that's going to happen, but you don't have to click confirm again.
Hey, Tom, with just the last few minutes that you have, do you actually have anything? So you guys are live, correct?
Yes.
So now that you've been doing this, instead of just talking about, what it can do, can you talk a little bit about what you've learned since you've been live?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think what I started to talk about, which is the Trust This app and Gas Relay tie into that, which is the friction points that users face. And when, for instance, Gas Relay allows the dApp to sponsor the gas fees for their users. So when we're talking about NFTs, You know, we're talking right now mostly about games, and games are aimed at the very average user, and the average user won't accept an experience which is more difficult. As much as they love the game and they love the
I don't
concept.
think any user will, right? We all agree it's got to be simple, right? That's like
Exactly.
saying it has to work, right? I mean, it's the cost of 100% of everything that exists has to be simple, or nobody's going to use it. But what have
Right.
you learned? Is anybody buying anything? Is anybody using? Is anybody trading? What can you help people understand that's actually happening in the market today? You know, what are you doing differently today than you did yesterday because you've actually seen how people are using the product?
Yeah, well, I think a good example is ETH Denver, where we created with OpenSea, we created a swag store, which allowed everyone in the conference to buy an NFT which symbolizes a swag item, and they went with this NFT to the organizers of the conference. They could show it; it was like a voucher, and then they got their unique, you know, T-shirt or whatever. But an interesting concept there was that they could also get a signed book by Andreas Antonopoulos, and they also had that NFT with them. And people really love that because now they, you know, a signed book is a collector's item, but now they also have some sort of certificate saying, you got this at ETH Denver. This is like, you can show that if you have that NFT, that's like a proof of purchase in a way that you always own. And you know, people really found it enjoyable that they could just buy this voucher whenever they want, and then they can show it and get their item. And we made it simple enough so it wasn't a hassle for them. You know, they didn't have to deal with the blockchain stuff. And, you know, I'll finish in a second. So I just wanted to show like how the experience actually looks when you're using Portis. So with the gas relay that covers the gas fees. So right now, this is creating a new user. So he doesn't have any gas money, he doesn't have anything, and he can actually interact with an application right away because he doesn't need gas money. The DApp sponsored it. So if you're talking about games, usually you want to have people, they're not going to buy necessarily something right off the bat. They're going to first want to experience your game for a little bit, but you still want them to be on the blockchain. So you're going to give them a couple of NFTs maybe to play around. And I think Mythereum does that when they give you like a couple of free cards. But then once you actually are hooked into the game and you see that you own those free cards and you played around a bit, but you didn't have to have that friction of getting the gas money, then you'll jump in and start buying items. And that's also something that we enable through Wire. And we see people, you know, buying here and there. We're still at an early stage of the ecosystem, but I think the collaboration you have between different projects is starting to create a very interesting ecosystem that will help all of these projects flourish because they're each like multiplying each other through what they're offering.
Okay, well, terrific. Thanks for that, Tom. And we got more time at the end. Thanks for sticking around for the questions at the end. So with that, we'll turn it over to Alex Atallah, CTO of OpenSea. Alex, you want to take over the screen?
Will do. Let me, oops.
All right, perfect.
Hi guys, so I'm Alex Atallah. I'm the one of the co-founders of OpenSea. We're a marketplace for non-fungible tokens and crypto collectibles. So a lot of what you just heard about from Portis, we basically collect these items as users. And one of the things that people do with them is figure out who's the best owner. And the best owner for an item, it's not just the person who values it the most, sometimes it's the person who's going to use it the most. But when you realize that you want to liquidate your item, you need a marketplace, you need a place to be able to place bids, to explore items, to discover new games. And we kind of solve all of those problems for users on OpenSea. So we kind of operate on this thesis that collectibles, digital collectibles, are a very, very strong use case for the blockchain because they kind of enable a public API for every game to access and for developers to build ecosystems around the games they like the most. So we want to really like feed into this open economy of digital collectibles and to help games grow their economies by just expanding into the economies of other games that are also built on blockchain. What we do is we look for developers first who are looking to create a game or to create a decentralized app with digital assets. These don't have to be game items. The vast majority of them are, but we've seen software licenses as digital collectibles where you can trade your software license on a secondary market. We've seen people sell wallet names, the equivalent of IP addresses on a decentralized operating system. Whatever you want to do, we help you open up a custom storefront, a marketplace, and you can bring your items right onto the blockchain by just following our dev tutorial and creating your smart contract. Any questions about that so far?
No, seems pretty straightforward.
Sounds good. So what this results in is we pool the liquidity from all of these games and dApps together in one place. And a lot of our users will like either explore dApps one by one, like you can see here for CryptoKitties, or see them all together and look at which ones are being traded right now, what volumes are really high, which games have the highest liquidity, which games are seeing the largest bids, which games are seeing the fastest auctions. And they'll chat about that in our media channels, and they'll also just interact by placing bids directly on items. So this is an example of the first large game that we launched with called CryptoKitties, and we've all heard of CryptoKitties by now. But what we do is we look for other games similar to them and for other assets that involve these tokens that are unique and usable in games or in apps. So right now we've got 3 million assets from hundreds of games, and it's built up the largest marketplace for non-fungible tokens. Basically, we provide lots of different abilities for users to sell or get liquidity on the marketplace, like fixed price, like declining price auctions, bundling items together, filtering and sorting the whole marketplace to discover new types of items or which ones have the highest bounties. We allow people to get referral bonuses. We allow developers to earn commissions on every single trade. We allow affiliates and marketers to earn commissions on every trade. We provide metadata for every one of these games in a free API that anyone can use. And we also provide pricing data, so you can download data about a game and see how assets have been changing in price over time. Or you can get live notifications right into your Discord server. And anyone can do this, and it's free. We also provide a lot of other developer tools that not a lot of people know about. We created an SDK called OpenSea.js. That's the last, I don't know if my cursor is showing up, but that's the last bubble in this slide, where you can just roll your own marketplace. And to create a sell order or to buy an item, it's just one line of JavaScript code.
And again, Alex, I'm going to come back. I mean, it's all the functionality is awesome, but what is actually happening? I mean, you got 100 things. My experience is, if a website does 1,000 things, 99% of the use is on 2 or 3 of the things.
Yeah. So I'll give an example. This is kind of an animation. Well, this is a game that we made, but it's to show you an example of one thing that's happening, and then I'll cover some general trends right after this. What we see is a lot of games built around creation, similar to this, where you kind of like compose or breed or upgrade an item and make it better and better over time. In this case, this is a composition game where you're building a Bitmoji style avatar. And these avatars you can use in other games. Like, these non-fungible tokens are important because they give people something that they can hold on to across the internet, not just in one app.
And again, I'm coming back to, again, just because you can doesn't mean anybody is. I mean,
Right.
are 5 people using this, 10 people using it, 10 million people? Can you give any sense of kind of what's going on, what's happening, what are users doing, what are they doing today that was different from yesterday? Anything that you can give us about kind of, to really kind of sink our teeth into what's going on in the NFT space from, you know, where you guys are sitting?
Great question. So right now it's a small community of gamers who are using these dApps the most. It's about 29,000 people across all games. It's very small. But the unique thing about these users is they have very high retention and very high engagement in terms of like the average volume they spend. With a normal game, only like 5 to 10% of a typical free-to-play game's users become paying users. Like, only 5 to 10% of the people in like Counter-Strike are actually paying for items. In Fortnite are actually like converting to paid users. So what blockchain does is it inverts that ratio. It means that by far most users are paying users, and what you build and what you create in the games is central to your participation in it, rather than the typical game mechanics you see. So what we've noticed is that the games over time, let me run back to this slide. The games over time have they've started with just collectibles where you're collecting like baseball cards. They've evolved into a mixture of traditional gaming, see Hash Rush on the left, and a collectible thing like Neopets, where basically it's kind of like a hybrid of traditional gaming and collectibles. And what I think they're becoming next is, I don't think I have a great slide for this. What they're becoming next is games that look a lot more like a traditional internet game that you'd play like in Unity, but where you can upgrade the look and feel of your item and trade the skins on decentralized marketplaces like OpenSea. And basically a user will start off without a wallet. And this is currently happening with games like My Crypto Heroes, with upcoming games like Crypto Assault just launched. I think a couple games coming in the future, just getting users into the game as quickly as possible. And then when you want to eject from the game and actually trade items on the blockchain, you can use something like Portis and instantly get a hosted wallet and store all your items in there. And companies like Portis and like us, this is the third and final thing that I'll say is really important that's happening right now with blockchain games. It's a lot easier for us to collaborate across companies because people use the same Ethereum APIs. This was not nearly as easy before blockchain because everyone's APIs were different. So we've just seen like a 3x to 5x speed up in terms of cross-company collaborations. And I think that's really unique.
Okay, terrific. Thanks, Alex. Next up, we've got Maree, who is the, Chris?
Hi, can you hear me?
There you go.
Cool.
Terrific.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about Raddy cards, which I guess like the other two speakers were more talking about platforms. This is more of a use case for NFTs. So what we did with Ready Cards is we made an e-card gifting mechanism using non-fungible tokens as like the underlying gifting idea. So the project basically started at the end of last year, where we wanted to make non-fungible token-based Christmas cards. And the idea was you could give cards to someone, and whatever sort of money you attach to this card would go to charity. And we partnered with a whole bunch of charities within the space, like the EFF and a bunch of others. And that was pretty successful. And around that same time, there were a couple of other groups doing similar things like Crypto Xmas. And we actually partnered with Crypto Xmas and sort of became like one newer project for version 2, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And the idea for version 2 was to kind of like build on this original idea and more drive towards the Chinese New Year red envelope concept. So the idea there is that you have an envelope that you'll give to someone, and you actually put money in that, and it's like a gift that you give on Chinese New Year. So what we wanted to do was really make like collectibles as a gift. So to take this traditional notion of a gift and like bundle it up into an NFT and sort of leverage that uniqueness that a traditional gift would have with the idea of an NFT, specifically pushing towards this Chinese New Year idea. And like one thing that was super important for us was to have like a very simple user experience. I mean, what the project or the idea that I just described now wouldn't really work very well if there was lots of clunky UX, and like the user experience needs to be like a really seamless flow. So what we'll do quickly is just go through like what the use case looked like and how everything fitted together. And then we can talk about like what we learned and those things afterwards. So basically what would happen is the user would come onto the site, and we had a whole bunch of artworks donated or contributed to the project from the open source community. So the user could select an artwork. They could then attach a message to their card. So this would be sort of like the written message on the back of your card. You can think of it like that. And then they can choose how they want to send it. So the idea would be you can send it via a claimable link. And the idea with this is that we make like a special link that you could then send to someone. And when they click on this link, they can then redeem the card, and whatever like ether or dye that is attached to the card can come out of it as well. We'll talk a bit more about that later and why that's cool. And then they could attach a donation to the card as well as like money to go in the envelope. So this could be like we want to put like 40% goes to charity and 60% goes to the recipient, and I want to attach dye to it. And you can choose obviously how you want to configure that, and then you send your card, and you get this like nice shiny card that you can then send to your friend, and like actually like they can claim it and get the ether out of it. And like this is cool, but like what's the point, right? Like why is this something that's useful? And what we sort of like matured the idea into thinking about was to say that this is like almost like an unsolicited way to drive onboarding into the space. So if I have some crypto and I want to sort of like incentivize my friends to join the space, what I can do is go and generate like a whole bunch of cards, and actually put some money in these cards and then send them out to my friends. And now there's like almost like a monetary incentive associated with these cards. Like I'm not just like interacting with some dApp, like there's actually like a real value-based, value-driven incentive to go through the onboarding process. And with these claimable links, like a big part of this was obviously to have like quite a seamless onboarding. So if you don't have a Web3 provider and you click on this link, like it needs to explain to you how to install a wallet or guide you through integrating with Portis, which we'll touch on a bit later. But it became this mechanism to incentivize your non-crypto friends to sort of enter the space through quite an interesting incentive mechanism. And that's kind of where we saw the majority of our usage was from people within the crypto communities trying to drive adoption like through their friend circles. And the feedback we got from this was super positive. I mean, there were lots of people that we'd send cards to, and that people within the Ready Cards community had sent cards to, and they came back to us and said like, this was such an interesting way to actually like introduce me into the space. Never having seen crypto or blockchain before, it's like a very sort of like novel way, and it caught my attention. And the fact that there was this like monetary incentive inside the card that I could only get if I unlocked it was quite an interesting take on it. So if anyone wants, you can scan that QR code. There should be a card there that hasn't been claimed, and you can go and grab, hopefully, a claimable link. And I'll talk a little bit more about the QR code idea. So a big part of the Chinese New Year was to integrate into WeChat. So if we can actually send these NFTs within like the existing communication channels, that becomes like a much easier user onboarding avenue, right? So we created like a WeChat group, and we got like lots of people within the Chinese community sending around these claimable links for Chinese New Year. And like, that was a great experience to try and like tap into a different market. So getting onto Portis and like how they fitted into this. So earlier on, Tom mentioned at ETH Denver what they were doing with the QR codes and collecting the swag. So the platform where they actually went and bought those cards was Raddy Cards at ETH Denver. And just to like flesh out that idea a little bit more, because I thought it was really cool, they printed like 700 flyers, and each flyer had a QR code on it. And you would scan the QR code, it would unlock a wallet, and then you would buy a Raddy card using that wallet, and then you would be able to claim your swag. And I think like what both of the previous speakers spoke about was this idea of like the synergistic effects from this network, and like the network effects from communities interacting with each other. And I think this is like a great example for that. How like two completely different projects can be like mutually beneficial from each other. One of the other things that we integrated into, and for like us, this was super important, was to leverage DAI and to have like a stable coin within this ecosystem, especially when we're donating money to charity, right? You don't want there to be fluctuations in the price. And also if it's a gift, you don't want the volatility of crypto to impact the value of your gift that you send to someone. And the other thing we used the Maker ecosystem for was to use the price oracle. So some of the cards within Raddy Cards had like a fixed, like a minimum price per card. So what we did is we actually like retrieved the current latest Ether to USD conversion rate, so that if you were donating in ETH, you would make sure that you hit that minimum. So like an important part of this whole project and the whole ethos of what Raddy Cards stood for, and what we were really trying to do was just to experiment and to like play around with different onboarding mechanisms, different UX experiences, and like different ways of trying things out. And like going into the future, this is very much like where we see Raddy Cards going. It's just like trying out different UX experiences, experimenting with different things, and like really trying to understand what fits. Because I think what's like super clear in this space right now is that there is not necessarily like one thing that's like the ultimate solution. UX is still really bad. I mean, there are lots of groups working on it, but it's getting there. Onboarding is not ideal. And like what matters is about experimenting and trying out new things. Yeah, so that's pretty much Raddy Cards in a nutshell. In terms of like adoption, we managed to sell about like 550 cards and raised about 30 Ether worth of ETH and DAI for charity, which is quite cool. And as prices move, hopefully that can turn into like a sizable amount for these charities. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, terrific. It's great, great story, Chris. And our last speaker today will be Chris Chaswell, co-founder of Mythereum. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about a game use case. I'm the co-founder of Mythereum. Mythereum is a distributed collectible trading card game built on the Ethereum blockchain. One of the very first things we discovered in building a blockchain game is that it is super expensive to do a lot of stuff on the blockchain. So we actually moved most of our game logic onto a private sidechain, so our users don't pay any gas. Now, of course, there's more recent solutions like Portis, Tom from Portis was talking about earlier, the gas relays. Those are great. And at the same time, it's still just super expensive and in most cases unnecessary to bloat the Ethereum mainnet with game logic or, little battle transactions like attack a guy. Mythereum is a pretty expansive game. It's built on the Ethereum blockchain. The idea is that there are a series of trading cards that are released in editions. Each edition is capped, meaning that there's a maximum number of cards from that edition that can be minted. One of the first ones we put out was Genesis, and Genesis sold out at a cap of 5,000 cards. So now we've got a couple of players who are trying to build complete sets of all Mythereum cards, of which are about 300 so far, a little over 300.
What was the cost?
The cost of Genesis cards were, at the time, they would have been about between $12 and $25 at the high end per pack. So a pack of Genesis was 7 cards. More recent cards, we also have a free-to-play model, so you can actually claim Survivor cards for free. You just go to the site, log in with your Portis wallet or MetaMask if you want, and you can click claim on the Survivor icon, and you'll have a set of 10 cards deposited into your sidechain wallet. And as soon as you're ready to convert those over to Ethereum mainnet assets and trade them on OpenSea, you can do so. We also allow people to onboard their crypto kitties and other assets from other games. You can bring in, say you have a fancy crypto kitty. Let me see if I can actually share something real quick. Yes, I don't know if you guys can see my screen, but I'm going to look at some kitties real quick. So for example, this Trioculus kitty here, I birthed this guy a long time ago on CryptoKitties, and it had just been sitting in my wallet for a long time. And I figured, why can't I do something with that? So we decided to build in support for onboarding your kitties. So you can see on my left-hand side here, I can see all the kitties that are currently in my wallet. I can bring one of these guys into the Mythereum universe for free just by transferring the kitty to our contract, which will be held in escrow until you unforge it. Once you forge, that goes on chain. So you have a unique NFT asset, a new CryptoKitty card called a Mythicat, which you can play with in the game, or you can trade it on OpenSea. You can also upgrade it. Its upgrades will stick with the card forever. For example, you can bump the defense. This one here is at 19 defense. It can go up to 20 defense for small cost of the in-game currency Mythex. And with that, you get a permanent change to that card. That card is now one step more valuable to the next guy. This game is really complex. As I said, there's a whole lot of different aspects to it. We've got rating, we've got tournaments, we have regular tournaments that pay out different amounts, as you can see here on our recent ones in the last couple of days, and some that are upcoming. We've given away well over $2,000 worth of prizes just in the last couple of weeks. And this is all funded via card sales and just gifts from the Mythereum team. So all the funds that are going into this thing are coming back into players' hands for the most part. To that end, we're actually moving Mythereum towards a player-owned DAO model as we can. So yeah, you can see, like, I've got a ton of cards I've been collecting for the whole time that I've been building Mythereum. I don't get any special treatment on that. I just love trading cards. So I've got a huge collection, and at any time I want, I can go in here, find somebody, surely, who's ready to battle. This guy, looks like that battle's actually already over. So you can see I'm already battling somebody here. This is all in real time. These are real playable battles. Like you're not doing anything like automated here. When you actually go to play, you can play in real time. You can watch anybody else's battles. You can see kind of what everybody's up to. There's a long-term leaderboard. Some of our more active players have been playing for a long time now. We've been out for about a year. As you can see, some of our players have thousands of battles under their belt. So this is a very vibrant community, and yeah, we welcome you guys to come on over, check it out at Mythereum.io.
That's cool. And like Chris, I asked of the other speakers, what have you been learning as you've seen your community growing and the battles growing and the cards purchases and such?
Yeah, so one of the things that we started out with was a focus on balance. We always wanted to make sure that this wasn't a game that was going to succumb to some like pay to win mechanics, which a lot of games do. You know, it's very hard actually to make a game that incentivizes purchases, and you know, which obviously fund the ongoing development of the game, and also honor that not everybody wants to or can pay to play. And also it's just simply unfair to allow somebody with a deep pocket to come in and, you know, buy up some OP cards and just run the game. So we, over time, have continually tweaked balance. We've continually worked with our users to improve the game. As you can see, if you join up on Discord, you can see we've got, you know, several extremely active members of the team. We're constantly taking feedback in. We're constantly adding new features, upgrading things, and you know, just trying to stay in line with what the community wants. We obviously have a direction for the game as a kind of overarching organizing principle, but really we're here to build something that leaves a lasting impression on the space, and that's kind of the goal. So our biggest learning in that is really that, you know, users want to see change. They want to see stuff that actually has some unique value to it, and I think we're doing okay with that so far.
And so is there an active secondary market for Mythereum?
Yeah, there's a very active secondary market. You know, it's our assets are, we haven't gone around doing as much promotional activity as some of the other players in the space, but a lot of, there are a very good number of vibrant players who are actively trying to build full sets. For example, we have a guy who joined the community just a few weeks ago and has been trying to get his hands on every single Mythereum card that's ever been created. He's having a really hard time because, you know, as I said, Genesis was capped at 5,000. So those cards are gone. You know, the people who have them many of them are not willing to let them go. So you can hunt on OpenSea and try to find those cards, but, you know, it's just unlikely that you're going to be able to come across everything. But yeah, if you wanted to, there always is that market right there at OpenSea. We don't, you know, we have a marketplace tab here, which is actually built on the OpenSea API. We really just kind of defer to OpenSea overall because they've really done an amazing job at creating a all-in-one marketplace for crypto collectibles, which is great for cross-marketing. It's great for us. It's great for everybody in the space.
Hey, Alex, can you talk about, you know, help us put Mythereum into context from OpenSea's perspective in terms of how you see kind of the secondary trading going on relative to, you know, to other games or other cards or collectibles?
Definitely. Mythereum, I think one of the most exciting games. They saw the space really early before the vast majority of games on OpenSea, and on what you can do. And like the kitty forging was innovative and I think really well implemented. They built their own marketplace that leverages the liquidity on OpenSea, which I think works really well. And one totally random, but I think really cool fact about Mythereum that I think you covered a little bit was the Mythex token. The Mythex token, when we first discovered it, it wasn't available on any, I think it's still not available on any exchanges, right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's not for sale.
Yeah, so so it's only something you can earn by gameplay. Mm-hmm. But if you go to OpenSea, if you go to the marketplace and you sort by cheapest assets, go to the upper left and then look for cheapest assets across all games. It doesn't even have to be in Mythereum. You'll see items for sale for Mythex. And when a user in OpenSea comes, they either have enough Mythex to buy it or they don't. And the only way they can get enough is by playing the game. So it's kind of a play to earn to play mechanic.
Yeah, we call it play. Play to win. So you're earning tokens. Yeah, you're earning tokens just by participating in the community.
Yeah. And we've noticed this sort of back and forth pattern be really beneficial for games, where they have to earn something in order to like get a token, in order to buy something else, in order to use that to earn something. If there this kind of like back and forth between dApps, in My Crypto Heroes, it happens a ton. It gets users really involved in bringing their friends and getting other people in, and then and just boosting retention for the game.
Interesting. Okay, so we're going to start taking some questions from the audience. The first one from Mike. And Tom, I'll point this at you, although also anybody else can chime in. Have you seen any major limitations that NFTs can't cover, especially in the design aspect? For instance, when is there just too much data to store in a tokenized format?
I think one of the problems with NFTs, I don't know about too much data. I never encountered that, but to that extent, to some extent, there's also a problem when you want to exchange multiple NFTs, and then it can become quite expensive. So I know there are a few EIPs that are directed at solving that. Like there's maybe someone else knows the number, but there's an ERC where you can have like a bag of tokens, and you can do an exchange of multiple tokens in one transaction, because all of those games eventually will have a situation when you're doing a lot of transactions of a lot of tokens from different contracts. It's not 5 CryptoKitties. I mean, I didn't want to interrupt before, but this whole what he showed, what Chris from Mythereum showed with the CryptoKitty, where they're using MythiCitty. I'm sorry, but you're taking the CryptoKitty and you're making it a MythiCitty, and this whole concept is amazing, because it's like saying, oh, I'm going to take something from Battlegrounds and use it in Fortnite. There's no chance for anything like that happening, and the interoperability here is amazing. So that's a huge plus. But if you're moving around 7 different tokens at once, it can be quite costly. But there are standards being written to actually, address that. So that's a problem, but the community is, finding solutions.
Okay, thanks. Does anybody else want to add to that in terms of kind of, the limitations of NFTs?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo the same kind of main point, which is that it can be quite expensive to move things around. We find that transferring cards is not a huge limitation, but really minting cards can be. With the current Ethereum block size limits, we can only really mint something like I don't know, 25 or so cards in a single transaction, and that's just because we use an extensible ERC 721 contract, which it stores a decent amount of data. Nothing crazy. There's I think 4 unique data points per card base, and those points are individually not particularly expensive, but when you're minting a series of cards, it's quite expensive to do. So that, I would say, that's a big limitation. It looks weird to a user when we say, yeah, this pack of cards costs 0.15 ETH, which is let's for simplicity, let's say $15, and then you're paying $12-15 in gas just to on-chain them. Like, seems kind of extreme, and that's really hard for a lot of users to swallow. So I would say that's an obvious limitation. But things like Portis, and Portis is not the only guys doing this, but I think they're doing a really good job with the gas relays. It does help because it can shift that cost from the users to the providers like us, and at the same time, that's still a lot of money that has to go into somebody's pocket, or out of somebody's pocket rather.
Yeah, that is that sounds like it can get expensive pretty fast. Sure, one of the other questions is, I guess, for Alex at OpenSea, in terms of getting a sense for what the volume is in the OpenSea marketplace today.
Sure, yeah. We typically see between 2,000 and 4,000 ETH a month in volume. and the volume looks like it depends on which games are launching as to how the volume grows over time. I'd say quarter to quarter, we see it on average growing about 50 to 100% a month. So the whole space is definitely growing, and OpenSea is just like a third of the space. So you multiply that by 3 at least to get the entire thing. And like we try to track as much as we can that doesn't happen on OpenSea, but we probably miss a lot. So it's at least 3 or 4x that. And does that answer it?
Within that growth, is there a particular part of the market that's growing faster than others, to the degree that you segment the market?
Like what do you mean by part?
That's what I'm asking you. To the degree that you segment the market in any way, be it geographically or otherwise.
So gaming is growing the most in terms of category. Geographically, I think there's a lot. There's the fastest growth is happening in Asia, in Japan especially. So assets that are like, there's a certain type of asset look that does better in Japan. And there are a couple of games that like weren't built as Japanese companies, like Blockchain Cuties, that are now getting a lot of traction because they're doing more marketing in Asia.
Okay, that's interesting. And Chris from Radicard, do you see much activity, or anybody else seen a lot of activity in Asia?
Yeah, so if we compare from our side, like the adoption we got between Christmas and Chinese New Year, it was like an order of magnitude more from China. And the user retention was a lot higher in China as well. But what is interesting from that analytics is to compare the user behavior based on demographic. So the Chinese users that we had, the majority of them came from our partnership and integration with IM Token. These were users that were like direct, deep linking into the website. So they would be going into the app on their phone, and there'd be a link to Raddy cards directly, like driving them on. And can
you explain who IM Tokens is?
It's like it's a wallet that you run on your phone. It's a dApp browser for mobile. So like it's basically like if that didn't make sense, instead of needing to install MetaMask on your desktop, you can now use like mobile providers to do the same thing. And so it's integrated wallets and dApp browser basically. So yeah, like the majority of users that we had that directed through this on the Chinese website didn't buy cards. Like we had lots of traffic that just didn't result in conversions. And I guess it's like the other groups can definitely talk with more experience around this, but just from like our limited experience, the Chinese market didn't engage as much as what we saw in the other markets from like a conversion perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that from the Mythereum aspect. We do see a good amount of traffic. Around 15% of all of our traffic is from China alone, and they obviously are engaged, and at the same time, the largest value per user comes from North America and Western Europe in our experience.
Any particular countries in Western Europe standing out?
As I'm looking at the map right here, Spain, France, and Italy are the brightest colors on my map.
Interesting. Okay, we've got just a few minutes left, so I'm going to throw one more question out there for, I'd like everybody to answer, and that's, Alex, you talked about some pretty heady growth rates for the industry. Can you talk about, if we were having this call in a year, what do you think we'll be talking about then that's different from what we're talking about now? Where do each of you think the market is going? And we'll start with Alex on that, then go to Chris Chaswell, Tom, and we'll finish the call with Chris Maree. So Alex?
Yeah, so my predictions for a year out, I think we're gonna see apps that have, I think like a companion app where you can trade items that you acquired in the game. that might be separate from the game entirely. Like basically you could play the game on your computer or even on consoles. And then when you're not playing the game, you leave and then go and trade items in the companion app on mobile when you're like waiting in line for coffee in your real life. I think we might see like a lot of projects come out of the wild, like Urbit, that are going to like, or ENS names or something with digital assets that people are barely using right now. But a lot of the biggest games we've seen come out of indies, not giant game studios, like indies like Chris from Mythereum or Chris from Radicards, and or small dev teams like either of them. And I think that Neon District is going to launch their founder sale today, and their user base is like very it's much larger in America than a lot of other games. So I think that game appeals to a lot of American gamer expectations and wants. But I think they're going to get a ton of users who just build these factions around completing specific parts of the game or the founder's key sale. And these factions will just get really into optimizing one part of the game and or creating items for the game, creating content that the game developers aren't creating themselves. And so we'll see like games with users becoming the devs and devs becoming the users, and the line's just going to get blurred.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. Chris, Chaswell?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect segue into my point about Mythereum becoming a decentralized entity. We're looking to hand over control of our universe to our players and see it evolve from that aspect. We'll see new features voted on by the community, and I think that's going to become a much more common thing in the future. I think right now we're still in very early stages in this space, and we're all as Chris from Radicards was saying, we're all experimenting, and it's fun. It's fun to experiment, and yet who knows what's coming next. In my opinion, I think we're going to see a lot more cross compatibility or how do you say, interoperability with different games. So we've already tried to get that started with Mythereum and CryptoKitties. We are doing the same with Chibi Fighters, and we're going to bring in various other games, plenty of games that have kind of died and gone to the wayside just because the development teams have stopped engaging. I think one of the big things that's upcoming is figuring out how to repurpose all those tokens and all that lost value.
Interesting. Okay, Tom?
Yeah, so I'll deviate a bit from the gaming because with Portis, we're dealing with a lot of different kind of assets. And I think that one of the more interesting things that we're going to see moving on is assets in the field of, things that are not games, things that are different. If we're talking about actual assets on the blockchain that are actual assets, we're going to see, I believe we're going to see if it's real estate, if it's deeds to something, if it's actually controlling an actual asset and moving it around. We're starting off with games because the people in this ecosystem really connect with that. And also you usually start off with things which are not, it's not your house. I love collectibles. I used to play it when I was younger as well. A card might be worth a couple of $1,000s, even more. Some baseball cards go for millions, but that's, in edge case. But we're talking like a deed to a house. It'll take time until we get to that point. But I believe that a year from now, we're going to start seeing we're going to start seeing that. We're going to see it to some extent. We're already seeing that in some projects, but it's going to become much, much more real. And again, the interoperability here is going to, offer so many possibilities.
Sounds exciting. Chris, you've got the last word.
Cool. So I think a good way to sum this all up and to sort of echo the same sentiment is about this idea of an ecosystem. And this is really where I see the NFT space as a whole going. I mean, obviously we've spoken about today like a whole bunch of different onboarding problems, and we've got people trying to solve that like Portis. We've got people trying to solve the marketplace like OpenSea. And I think that for me, at least, the important point and what's going to really accelerate the growth of this ecosystem is this network effect. So a year from now, what I really see happening is this really powerful increasing growth due to this community and an ecosystem of projects that are all contributing to the same sort of larger idea. And to echo what was just said from Portis's side, is to have more real world elements on chain, and this network effect really starting to just become exponential as more and more assets become tokenized through NFTs, and as even components that we haven't thought about start to enter into the ecosystem.
Okay, well, terrific. It sounds like it's going to be an exciting year. And with that, I'd like to thank Alex, Chris, and Tom for participating on the call today. We'll have a blog post out on the call and the recording available the next few days. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you.